Hey guys, this is Eric Vento with Government to Private. I have with us here tonight Lisa Dean. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, guys, if you haven't tuned in here before, this is a government to private podcast where we talk about all the different ways that you can transition out of the government into the corporate world. There's not just one or two paths, there's a ton of different paths. And the purpose of these podcasts in general is to show you the diversity of those journeys and show you all these different stories of people who have transitioned successfully. But we also hear from subject matter experts in their respective fields to help give you a leg up and give you an understanding of some common misconceptions or myths that need to get dispelled. And this is a podcast tonight where we're going to do that. We're going to talk about ATS, or the applicant tracking system, which there's so much information out there that doesn't make sense, isn't accurate. And we have with us tonight someone who uses ATS on a frequent basis, who is going to talk us through what ATS is, what ATS isn't, give us some real life examples, but also show us inside the ins and outs of the ATS and what recruiters actually see when they're in the system. I think this is going to be super, super impactful. And I've only seen ATS on a few occasions myself, so I'm actually looking forward to it as well. So, Lisa, thank you again for agreeing to join us, and we really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. I think you're a little generous in calling me a subject matter expert, but I'll take it.
Well, that you're a subject matter expert to me. So, why don't you give us a little bit of background about you?
Sure. I actually started my career in teaching. And after I've been teaching for a while, I thought, I'm ready for more. And you're a little bit limited in the education system of where to grow and especially where to make more money, let's be honest. And so I pivoted into a marketing and entry level marketing role and worked there for a home builder for a few years and really climbed the ladder there. I don't know how else to say it, but I just got a lot of promotions there. I was workaholic for sure, just out to prove myself after teaching. And so after a few years there, I moved on. And well, I left there as the VP of customer care, and I created the customer care department from start to finish. And it was a big job. I don't know if you've built a house before, but people are
No.
usually not very happy during the process. So it was a huge challenge for me, but I loved every second of it. Then I moved to the mortgage industry to build a client experience team for someone it was a partner from when I was at the home builder. And as the director of client experience for the region, I was able to then, experience working for other offices, coordinating everything and building that team from scratch as well. That was really great. Two totally different cultures. So I feel like it really got me centered to where I was going then. And so then another partner of then that mortgage company brought me in to act as a GM as he was going into startup mode and selling agencies across the United States. So that was a huge challenge as well. And I loved every second of it. And then I kind of fell into recruiting. There had been a recruiter that reached out to me when I was acting as the GM, and it was for a very similar role. And we met, and that just it wasn't the right thing. It ended up, it had been a partner of one of my bosses, so it just didn't
Mm.
feel right for anyone. So uh, anyway, then we kept in touch, and she had mentioned that she would really like someone to help her kind of expand her agency. So I went to work there for some time. It was for an agency, a recruiting agency. And that's a whole nother beast, of course, new challenges there. I really liked that too. It's definitely full on gas, 100 miles an hour, all times. And so fast forward to today, it's kind of a little bit in the middle. I'm an in-house recruiter for a franchise that has two locations. my title is actually Director of Internal Business Operations and Recruiting. So I will have reach outside of recruiting, but that is, I'm the only one doing the recruiting. So that's a very big focus when we have roles to fill, which is always so.
What a diverse career. I love that.
Definitely. Yeah, definite zigzag.
So what do you love the most about recruiting?
You know, it's hard to say because I I really think that I like the analyzing conversations, talking to people, and then being able to present my point of view to the hiring manager. Now, of course, hiring managers, they make their own decisions ultimately, and
Sure.
recruiters don't have a lot to say, but how we present the candidate is, a great first step in at least getting them in front of them.
Absolutely. So, before we jump into, the purpose of this call, a lot of people, there's a lot of opinions out there about, we have that short pre-screening call, to talk through like the job description, maybe compensation, assess a fit for the role. And then we jump into other interviews with other members of the company. You know, when you're presenting candidates to a hiring manager, what are some of the factors that you look at when you're doing that?
I think when we first start recruiting for a certain role, we've had the conversation, of course, with the hiring manager, but we aren't really sure, what's in their head. And because we
Right.
might know A through D, that's what our focus is on. And we might present A through D. And they're like, well, but I was really actually looking for this, or, I kind of wanted someone that had a little bit more of this. All of those are valid. I've been a hiring manager. I was a hiring manager for 10 years, and we had an in-house recruiter, and I didn't always agree with his opinions. And ultimately, you have to be in that seat to know exactly what it is. And sometimes you can't really say it. You just um, I mean, I guess you could always say it, but
Right.
maybe not ahead of time, proactively. So I forgot what our question was.
Talking about what factors do you consider when
Oh, yeah.
presenting?
So after learning about all the different things they're looking for, you really learn what to hone in for that presentation, and what things that you want to highlight for the
Mm,
hiring manager.
yeah, that's great. So when you're looking at resumes, and say, all things being equal, you're looking at just experience, and you're trying to match it back to the job description. How do you, what do you want to see on a resume, and that enables you to make the most informed decision about whether a candidate ultimately moves forward on a job description? I know this is super subjective, what I'm asking you, but there's just a lot of opinions out there about, well, do I put a job description on my resume? Do I go for, measurable impact and quantifying what I've done? What do you want to see usually when you're comparing multiple candidates for the same role?
Those the metrics added on there are really big for the hiring managers. So I want to always encourage that. They're important to me too, but I'm generally looking more broadly than that. Um, I think, there's a whole lot of buzz around using keywords and key phrases from the job description. And, it depends on what you're doing, but let's just take my background, for example. When I was at each of those jobs, I was hiring. When I was at the one acting as GM, I was also, actively recruiting sales team members. But if I was to take that experience and apply to a job for recruiting, I need to include those things. But if
Mm,
I'm applying to a job that has nothing to do with that, that's a blip instead of a focus. So you
right.
really want to take what job you're going for. All of us have so much within those jobs. There's no way to put it on the resume, right? You may have done some social media in that role. You may have worked on reviews. Are those things that matter for recruiting, maybe not. So it really is just going to depend on the role. So I do think there's something to be said on looking at the job description. You fit because you know all of those things that are and are not in your resume. But the person you're sending that resume to does not know what's not in the resume. They're not
Right.
going to just assume that because I was this, I also did this. So you don't want to have to try to get anyone to assume. So go ahead and put it in there. So what I like to, I work with coaching clients and for myself as well. I'll take the job description, um, and I'll read it and I'll be like, so if I had a client on the phone, I would highlight, I'd have the highlight each part that are badass in, and
Right.
how you want to make sure they know that. So I wouldn't necessarily copy and paste that. And again, only if you actually have the experience. I think that gets a little confusing too. Don't just take the job description and drop it in there. So put those things in there that really show, oh, well, this person has done that. This person has done that. This person has done that. Keywords also, I recommend for the same reason, because it just helps connect those dots for the person that's looking at your resume. I think too, though, we might put a little too much stock into the job description because it was written at one time,
Right.
but it's not always kept up to date. It doesn't always have all the things in it that they're looking for. It should. So I'll just say that it should.
Yeah, and
But
there's a lot of companies that do a really, really fantastic job, I think, on writing their job descriptions. And then there's a lot, who recycle job descriptions, and you can tell,
yeah,
because they forgot to remove some information that doesn't really match the job description, you
yes.
know,
And
and
we wonder, like, how could that get online and have it be X, Y, or Z? But I'm here to tell you, I'm a detail oriented person. I consider myself a perfectionist in a lot of ways. And I have been horrified to see something of mine be like, oh my gosh, how did that still have that in there? I swear I took that off. But so many things go on. You might have like reposted the job and then you went and you pulled another one out and reposted that when you thought it was the other one. There's just a lot to juggle. So
yeah,
I try to
there
think.
absolutely is. And I think a lot of people, they just forget that, we're all human. And, when I'm coaching my clients, one thing I always tell them is the resume isn't for you, it's for your reader, whoever that may be, whether it's the recruiter or the hiring manager. You should be writing your resume to align to that job description,
Yes.
and that's easier said than done. Like, it's easy for me to say that. It's a lot harder for people to put that into practice, and, you know, keywords are another story. It's like if you have keywords on your resume, but you don't have any experience that backs up those keywords, then it can
Right.
be easy for the reader to say, well, do they just copy and paste that from the job description?
Right.
You know,
And you're going to be discovered. There's no
right.
reason to try to throw something in there that you haven't done. If it's important, it's coming out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I could talk about this all day long, but I know that I want to be respectful of your time as well. So, um,
Let me throw one more thing in there
yeah,
on
please do.
that. There's a tool out there, and you may have seen it going around on LinkedIn, but it does what we were just talking about. It takes those keywords and phrases from a job description, and if it matches your experience that it has, it'll throw it in there for you. So it's called Teal. Um,
Teal. Yeah, I have heard of that. Yep.
yeah, so they have a. I need to add that to my website, by the way, but they have like a free link that you can click on. So
Yeah, I heard about it about a couple weeks ago. I tried it out, and it does a pretty good job. It's
yeah,
not perfect, nothing is, but it does a pretty good job, for a tool.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and jump into all things ATS. So, can you give us a quick overview about what an ATS is?
When I'm talking today, I'm going to be talking about my experience with ATS. So other people might have a different system, obviously. Other people, I've have experience in a few of them, but I'm talking about mine and what the majority of recruiters I talk to that I network with also deal with. So
Perfect.
For me, it's a little more than a storage system, um, but it is not as advanced as people think. I'm also going to throw in that it will be. I have no doubt that there are some already. I don't think they're very heavily used yet. People aren't buying them. They're still being developed. I don't know, but I am certain that this conversation will really be moot before you know it because of technology. But for now, what I use it for, what its purpose serves, is to just store the information and help you move it from one step to the next, you know? And so you can disqualify, you can qualify in there, but it's someone doing it 90, I want to say, you know, 95% of the time. We'll talk about the exception that when it automatically disqualifies you. But, you know, I have the steps in our process, and I literally just go in, I work them, and I move them to the next step. And then when they're disqualified, they're not in there anymore. So it's really that simple. Now, the ATS I used before in the agency, it was also a CRM. So you could track your activities. The one I use now, and most of them are not, and they're not advanced at all. They're not helpful other than that. Like, you want it to say, oh, it's Tuesday, you're supposed to call this person back, or flash, you haven't set this interview yet. It doesn't do any of that. It really is just there. So I have a whole nother system I use to track all of them and move them so that I don't forget.
So none of them are talking to each other.
Oh no, I'm literally by hand using Outlook tasking.
Oh,
I went to some training in it a long time ago about how to really use it effectively, and it's like a lifesaver, but it's ridiculous that you have to do both of those things.
so you mentioned systems. Like, how many different ATS systems or ATS platforms exist out there?
I think, you know, there are quite a few. You know, the one that I use currently is Workable, and not to be confused with Workday, which everyone wants to as soon as they see it's Workday. I know sometimes I work with clients and apply for jobs for them, and I see Workday and I'm like, oh my gosh, this
Oh
is gonna take
no.
me forever. And then you like try to remember, have I done this one? Do I have a password? Why am I setting a password? You know, and it's ridiculous. That's actually one of the things that I'm really hard about when I start a job in recruiting, is making it easy for the candidates.
So from a Workable perspective, or just ATS in general, when someone submits their application, what happens next?
Um, it's in the system. That's all that happens.
Okay.
No notice, there's no notification for me. There might be something on the back end. Let's see, does it also? It may send me an email. Obviously, I don't use them. I have those set to filter out because I'm in it every day. So
Right.
it does send an email. Yeah, that's true. So sends an email and it parks you where you belong, in which job, under application stage.
Does it automatically scan the resume for keywords or anything like that?
Absolutely does not help me
Okay.
in any way other than put it in a file folder.
Got it. So when it comes time to look at the resumes, does it put it in any kind of ranking whatsoever, or is it ranked by when it's received, or like how does that work?
That's a great question, because people do think that it scans it, it looks, and it can give a rating. Mine and none that I've experienced do either of those two things. The order it will go in will be the newest on top. So, and then there are, like, within the folder of application, there are two files for qualified and disqualified under
Got
there.
it. So basically, it doesn't matter how qualified you are, early bird gets the worm. Basically, like if you really want to be seen first and foremost, and there's not an application limit, attached to the job requisition, it really behooves you to get your application in as soon as possible.
It does, because well, it really all depends on the recruiter, honestly. I mean, if you're the first one to apply and that's not a priority for them, and it's 2 weeks before they go in there and look, like, which is like a post I made the other day was from an article that was talking about, the length of time to hire. And one of the things was talking about 2 weeks from the time, you apply. And so in that case, the newest one's going to be at the top
Right.
and the first person is going to be at the bottom. But for me, I keep up with mine, every day, every couple of days. On a bad week, I might go 2 days without seeing it. But it takes going in there and looking.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the, and I know you'll cover this when you jump into the system, but what are some of the, I guess, exceptions, or maybe I'm not saying it correctly, but what are some of the toggles that you can turn on or off that may impact when the job or requisition gets cut off for applications or anything like that?
Well, I think one of the things I would want to address is the knockout question. I pause because I want to say it the right way, because this is going to be one of the things that is the exception of the ATS working some magic and automatically disqualifying someone. So they're knockout questions. Now, you may get to an application and it may ask you 10 different questions. They're not all knockout questions. None of them may be knockout questions, or a handful, maybe they set it up where all of them are. That's something you have control over. So if on the application, the question asks, so I have one for a outside business to business sales executive, and it's required that they have 2 years of outside business to business sales. That's a hard requirement that we don't make exceptions.
Right.
So ours is 2 to 3. So I have a knockout question in that application that asks how many years, or actually I just did it this way. Do you have at least 2 years of outside business to business sales? If you say no, I'm not going to see your application. It's going to automatically disqualify the person. Now I can go back in there to make sure, that an email gets sent out to let them know, but you're just automatically disqualified. I have, 4 other questions in there that are not going to do that, but that's one way that it knocks you out. There are really no other toggles back. There are a lot of things that you can change to make it easier or harder. And so I when I first started, it was a new system and I didn't know. So but once I started clicking around and learning, I was like, oh my gosh, these poor candidates, so I went through and switched everything that, could be optional or not required, and just made it all not required.
How about like a max number of applications?
Well, I wish I had the problem of getting too many applications. Here in Oklahoma, we do not have the problem that you're seeing on LinkedIn, where I have 1,000 applicants in, for the first 5 minutes. So I don't know if I have a max, but I would
Gotcha.
also think, as if I did get to the max, I mean, you just go and disqualify those that aren't qualified, and it opens it up more. But of those 1,000, so many of them aren't going to be qualified in the first place. And especially, if you've got those knockout questions, it's going to keep it, there'll be room. So I don't know how big of a problem that is for other people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Let's jump into some of the questions that we received from the individuals on LinkedIn when we put this podcast out on LinkedIn. So one of the first questions that we got was, what is the output of ATS? Is there a score per applicant? Is it ranked, or applicants ranked? How do you know when to pursue or reject an applicant?
So kind of like we talked about before, there is no ranking, there is no scoring.
Yeah.
We use an assessment, so I know what they're talking about because we work with an assessment company, and when that comes back, it does have a ranking. I don't use it; it doesn't do anything automatically. So I know what they're talking about with that ranking. My system does not do that.
Okay. Do you know what ATS systems do use it?
Thanks for asking. Don't know any that do,
Okay.
and I will say that every recruiter I know gets really frustrated when we see out on LinkedIn people talking about the ATS and how it does all of these things. And we're like, no, it doesn't. And people just don't believe you. And it's one of the things that you go between just being like so confused, like, what, to really frustrated. Like, do you think that all recruiters are banding together and just saying, okay, everybody, lie so that they think we're really working? Pretend your ATS doesn't do that. I don't understand why people don't believe us. And again, same as I said earlier, I'm sure that there may be systems out there, but I know, on LinkedIn, I've connected with, some recruiters who work in huge companies, which I would think would be the first ones to invest in something like that. And, I know some recruiters who've been doing it for 20, 30 years, and they don't know of any. So it's where I'm giving it out to say, I'm sure they're out there. I don't want people, upset and throwing names at me that, well, this one does it, this one. Maybe so. My experience
Right.
and everyone I've talked to, we don't know that. We don't
Yeah.
have it.
Yeah. So just to kind of put this to bed, outside of the knockout questions where you're automatically disqualified, a human being is responsible for reviewing and either approving or disqualifying every single application that comes in, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. I hope that finishes the conversation once and for all, but I'm
If
sure it won't.
only.
Let's talk about resume length.
Okay.
So this is something that comes up a lot, and obviously there's an opinion for every single person out there, but is there a resume length and that you're looking for, and does it affect ATS at all?
The resume link does not affect the ATS. The resume goes into the ATS no matter how you put it. So a lot of resumes are parsed by the ATS, but the resume is also there. So let's say you're when you go into Workday, for example, and you'll put your resume in, and then it will make you go to every box that could ever exist about what month and year did you start that job, what month and year did you end that job, and what did you do at that job? And you're like, it's right there. I just put you in there. Why are you not reading this? And so it anyway, it's all there, but the link doesn't matter. It takes it and it make a little summary of it, whether you do anything or not, and then it also puts the resume in. Personally, I go to the resume anyway because it's I don't know, it's more common for me.
Right.
It's comfortable because I know
Yeah.
how a resume flow goes. I mean, it has more detail and all of those things. So um, but it doesn't do anything tricky.
Okay. Awesome. Appreciate that. Next one, does regurgitating buzzwords from the job posting increase your chances of being noticed?
Uh, Regurgitating things from the job description that were important requirements will give you a better chance of being noticed as a connection. If someone's reading it and they're familiar with the job description, which they should be, then they will be thinking to themselves, oh, yeah, we're looking for that. Oh, this person can do that too. Okay. And let's talk to this person.
I think it's important to reinforce what you just said about it's not just about copying and pasting the job description over. It's about describing how your specific experience aligns with the requirements, the keywords, the requirements, you know?
Yes, I wouldn't do, the copy and paste. I would just say, okay, so this is something it says that I have experience in. Let me make sure that I've got a bullet point, and maybe I want to move my bullet point that I already had towards the top, because as we know, humans are scanning it and sometimes they don't read all the bullet points.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, makes perfect sense. Thank you for that. Fourth, is ATS more of a pointer for a human to actually look at your resume or CV, or does it really decides who makes the first cut? And I think you answered this already.
Yes, it just holds it and it doesn't make the decision of who makes the first cut.
So, one of the questions that we got that I didn't put on here is, a lot of people complain, and I put myself in the same bucket because it's happened to me, but you hit that apply button and 5 minutes later you get that auto rejection, and it may be like 2 a.m. in the morning, and like, well, I'm sure that recruiter's in bed and not looking at my resume, but most likely that's because I did a knockout question or something like that, correct?
That is true. It's most likely because of a knockout question. Chances are that the recruiter is not working at that time, but also chances are not that the ATS read your resume and made a decision. So it's going to come down to the knockout.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us to our last question is, that misconception that the ATS auto rejects people. How do you think that rumor kind of got started?
I think a lot of it probably has to do with what you said. I just applied and it came back as I did. I'm rejected and no one's looked at it. So it's really it's a reasonable thing to assume. But also a lot of people will say, well, I got it on a Saturday. So, okay, so let's go back to that. The solution for people not thinking that is to have a way to delay that rejection, right? So,
Right.
I mean, I feel like that's a little weird because you're putting a delay on it so people don't think that the machine made the decision. But if it's happening right then, the machine did make the decision based on a knockout question.
Right.
But anyway, so there's a way to delay them. I don't know how to do it on mine. I don't know if it does it or doesn't. And I use a lot of the features in here. That's not one that I know of. I'm not the administrator.
Yeah.
Our company is a franchise, and so that is something I have on my list of questions. Is that something? But so if you've got that in there for a delay, because this is the other way. The second reason I think people think it is, well, I got a notice on a Saturday. So first of all, it is possible your recruiter is working on a Saturday. If it's an agency recruiter, pretty good odds because you get paid when you hire someone. So you find all kinds of time pockets of time to work. But probably more likely is that it happened. Let's say the recruiter was working Thursday and they went through and cleaned some things up, and the ATS is set to deliver in 48 hours. So therefore in 48 hours you're getting that, and
Yeah.
you're confused at why you're getting it right now. So I think that's probably where the rumors originated.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. I mean, obviously you're not going to be able to please everybody, no matter what you do, people are going to think what they think, and social media has, for all the good that social media has done over the past 15 to 20 years, it definitely makes the negative spread like wildfire,
Yeah,
and
it does. And there are, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of coaches who will, they solicit people to say, hey, let me make an ATS friendly resume for you. Now, I think there is such thing as an ATS friendly resume, but not the way they're talking, not the one that uses the right phrases and keywords. But when you put it in and it parses,
yes,
I don't know if you've put in a resume before and like nothing came over right. You're like, what? It just didn't read right. And then if you have one that goes through and it does parse it right. But again, your resume is right there to see too. So it's not
yeah.
like end all be all. That you
I
just
tell
need to not make it fancy.
exactly. Like no photos, no like, a lot of colors all over the place. I mean, just
The different
make it simple.
columns. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
it.
Like you're distracting people from reading your resume. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time that the way that you make an ATS friendly resume is to tailor it. Like if you tailor your resume to the job description, you're making it so much easier on the recruiter to actually tell whether they want to interview you or not. Instead of just putting your job description on there and forcing them to basically guess whether you have the right experience and then potentially bring you in for an interview either virtually or in person. you
Yeah.
know and it's like I one of the things I tell people on almost every single phone call I have is I said your resume is all about letting the recruiter make one of two choices. One, I love that person's experience. I think they'd be a good fit when we bring them in. Or because they've been so detailed in explaining why they're a good fit, I know that they're probably not what the hiring manager is looking for. And so great experience, but thanks, but no thanks. Either way, you're giving them enough information to make a really informed decision and make sure that they're using their time to the best of their ability.
Right, because that's what it comes down to. People think they want to get that interview, but ultimately, if it's not the right job for you, you don't want the interview. You don't want to waste your time on that. So I like
Right.
the way that you're presenting that, which is, showcase what you have. And if that's right for it, then they'll call you. If it's not, you don't want to be called.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can count on a lot of different hands, through the years where I submitted a resume and I thought, I got this. Like I am the best fit for this job. Like this is tailor made for me, and I get a rejection. Maybe I had an internal referral. Maybe I had someone drop my resume on the hiring manager's desk, which, I try to do for every application I put in. But sometimes you still get that rejection. You're like, what is going on? And it
Yes.
wasn't until I was on the other side of that as a hiring manager that I really got that first person perspective of, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into the interview process. It's not just about qualifications. And, there may be some other factors that weren't on the job description for whatever reason that the hiring manager is looking at. And ultimately, I have to be willing to say, well, I'm not in charge of this job posting. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, which there could be a lot. And I'm just going to have to trust that this wasn't a good fit for me, you know?
I like that, the thinking I'm gonna have to trust that they know, what's gonna be the right fit, or else I didn't, display. But I do see, and listen, being a job seeker is one of the worst experiences on the planet. It's a very fragile place to be because you're getting rejected on a regular basis. It really causes that self-doubt. You get imposter syndrome. Oh, am I not really qualified for these jobs I'm applying to?
Yeah.
And so I feel for them. I mean, when I became a recruiter, before I even knew I was thinking about it, when I was going through it, I was thinking, I made a list. Like, if I ever become a recruiter, this is going to be my focus, right? And I actually have used that list. And that is why on LinkedIn, my headline is empathetic recruiter, because I really put their feelings at the top of all the interactions that I have with them. I really make sure that I'm treating them as a VIP, no matter if they were a referral or not.
Yeah.
And really, because they are the VIP, those are the ones. And ultimately, only one person gets that job, but all of them may be qualified. And so, going back to what you said in the beginning, I see posts like this all the time. I was perfect for this job. Why would I get rejected? I have been there. You just said you've been there. I mean, literally, when you read a job description, like, I've done all of this in my last three jobs, and then I make sure my resume reflects that. And then you get that rejection back. it's disheartening. And I think that may go into why people think it's automatic too, but I don't know why it would automatically kick you out if you look like a perfect fit. But it's really, really, really hard to be a job seeker. And I don't know, I think now more than ever. And the better technology gets, honestly, is the harder it gets.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't know, expectations change. And so there's more expected out of them. Now you can't just apply for a job. You then have to try to reach out to some stranger and say, "Hey, tell me about this job," and hope that they engage and hope that
Yeah.
they like you and hope that they go, "Hey, check out this person's resume." But I mean, you get a low response rate on those. I highly recommend them, by the way.
Yeah.
I
I do
mean,
too. And that, I tell every single person I talk to, whether they are a client or not, that relationships are at the core of everything that we do. And, I've had a lot of jobs since I came out of law enforcement, but, you know, 80% of those jobs came from someone reaching out to me on LinkedIn as a result of networking and relationships saying, "Hey, I think you'd be a good fit for this job. Are you interested in having a conversation?" And only two of them came from me just cold applying without knowing anyone and just hoping for the best. And so, I know a lot of people who never used a referral and they've been very successful. I know a lot of people who have only gotten jobs through networking and relationship building. And I remain convinced that it is only through relationships and our ability to be intentional about how we connect with people, especially on LinkedIn, that really brings the most value to our lives.
that's true. And if you go back to my introduction, notice I said, and that was a partner of the place I worked for before, right? So all of those were connections. The job I have now, though, I blindly applied on Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah, and when they first called, I was 7 weeks into another process for a job I really wanted. And I was like, "Oh, I'm not interested. I'm really invested in this," and flying all over the country to go meet them. And then they ended up putting the job on hold. And my boss now ended up calling me back, just, "Hey, so did it work out?" I was like, "Actually, no." And so we had a conversation. So, I mean, it can happen both ways. I always recommend using all your methods. No reason to limit yourself.
Yeah.
But the job that I was talking about that dragged me along for 7 weeks, um, I got that because I got that far in it because I did reach out to the hiring manager when I applied, and he responded back, and that's how I got a lot of interviews. And then that
Yeah.
gives you the opportunity to really explore, is this going to be the right fit for me both ways? And I think that's the thing too, that job seekers think, "Oh, I want to impress this recruiter or this hiring manager," but you really don't. You want to be yourself, and you want to hope that that impresses them, because if you
Yeah.
impress them being someone else, and I mean, you don't really know what you're getting till you get in your job, but they know what it's like.
Yeah.
So if they're not choosing you, I mean, instead of thinking you did something wrong, maybe think, well, I'm just going to take an extreme example. Maybe they know that their culture is not the kind you're looking for. Maybe you're looking for that, respectful, professional. Maybe they know it's nothing like that behind closed doors. And so they don't think you're the right
Yeah.
fit. Well, be glad, right?
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, if they hire you and then you get there and you're like, "Oh no, 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 this is a toxic, whatever. I'm getting the heck out of here," then you just cost them a ton of money, and they're going to have to rehire that position, which costs even more money.
And
You
it's
know,
taking you longer because
exactly.
you're going to have to start over now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the impetus is definitely on both parties, but more so the hiring manager and the recruiter to ensure that you are the right fit. And I tell that all the time to people. I'm like, your qualifications get you to the interview, but more often than not, it's your ability to fit into the company and the role that gets you the job.
Mhm.
Because we're all looking for longevity for the most part. We're looking for stability. We're looking for someone to give us a minimal amount of time, and if we don't think that that person is capable of doing that, then why would we hire them? you
Right.
know
Yeah.
So, um, I could talk about this all day long. This is really, really interesting stuff. But I also know that, you have a life and you also want to jump into workable and show us the ins and the outs of the system. So I would love to give you the opportunity to take us through what you have to show us tonight.
All right, let's do that. Let's see. Okay. All right, so, oh, here we go. Let me make this a little bigger. I don't know if that helps it with you. Can
Yeah,
you see it still?
perfect.
Okay, and can you see like where my pointer is right now? All the
Yep,
way up?
I can see all the way down to your page width, and yeah, there we go. Yep,
Okay,
perfect.
perfect. So this is a job, just so the audience knows, that I created. I just called it example job description for Lisa, copy of branch manager. And for, reasons of privacy, I put my resume in here so that we can look at it. So when someone applies, it came back to me that yes, I get the email notification. If I go in and look at it, I'm in it all day, every day though. So that's why I don't use my notifications. But I go in there and it's just sitting there. It looks just like this. So this is like, if I put someone in, I put it in this area sourced. But if someone applies, I actually went online and applied to this. It comes in here and it just drops it in, and everything you see here is what happens. So I will go down here and show you. This is where it parsed this out for me. So it pulled in the dates, and then over here it calculates, how long that you worked there. And I don't have dates on my college, so it doesn't put anything in there. And then this is though where I always go. It's holding my resume. So mine is 3 pages. You asked if length matters. 3 pages would be the max I would recommend. And that's if you have, enough experience that's worth including all the details. And as we talked about, I had different responsibilities. There was overlap, of course, but they were really different roles. So
This could be more accurately described as your master resume.
yes, yeah, it's my master resume. But I always recommend going back, about 10 years.
Yeah.
10 or so years. So if I had something that was in education, like an ed tech job or something that I was applying to, I would put on my
Teaching.
which I don't have on this one. So just depends. So yeah. Okay, so you can see it's housed here. This is where I go. And notice it didn't parse anything else, didn't parse my bullets. Maybe I have had some where I can see the paragraphs under them. So might be how it's set up. So down here, if I keep going, it just gets my email. And these are questions I was asked in the application. Can you provide proof that this is going to be a knockout question, probably built into the system. I didn't make it one, but I'm pretty sure if you say yes here or no, that you can't provide proof you're legally eligible, it's going to knock you out and disqualify you. So that would be an example. It pulled in my LinkedIn profile since I had it on there. And then down here, this is like if we do have an assessment of the predictive index. So this is where I would order it. And I know it says add answer. It's because they made it work, they integrated as best as they could. So that's all that's there. Oh, and here, answers to, these are the questions I added. Okay. So this is what comes automatically. This is what I added. So my questions added to the application were: what is your desired total compensation? How many years of experience do you have directly managing a sales team? I may set this up where if they said 1 and the requirement was 3, it might disqualify them. This one is not set up to disqualify. I've talked to people who put 0 And in my head, I'm thinking I probably should make that a knockout question because it's a hard requirement of that role. So, and then, how many years of experience with this? How many direct reports have you managed? Do you have, this is the knockout question. Do you have 6 to 10 years of management experience in both sales and operations roles combined? For me, I didn't go ahead and put a number on these because I didn't want to rule anyone out because of it. Sometimes, you're directly over operations, but you were heavily involved in the sales side. So I didn't want to miss someone for having it too stringent. You might have places that they get those 1,000 applications like you talked about, and they may be more stringent on it. For me, I'm really trying to make the most of the applications I have and try to find a match. And I think that that's something too that most people want to recognize. Recruiters want to find a match. They want you to be that match. They want to present you to the hiring manager. So they're looking for ways to connect you, not ways to disqualify you.
So that brings up a question real quick.
Mhm.
So I see the desired total compensation. So I get those questions a lot, especially on Workday, where I ask you like, hey, what do you want to make?
Mhm.
And, especially for roles that don't describe what the base compensation is, I always tell people, well, put your absolute minimum that you want to make, because sometimes putting 0 results in a knockout, but what do you like for positions that don't give you the base range or the compensation ahead of time? What do you recommend that people put in that box if they get asked? And it's a requirement, of course.
Right. If you can put in there negotiable, but sometimes they require numbers.
Right.
Honestly, Eric, I don't know what the right answer is. It always makes me nervous as a candidate thinking, oh, I'm going to go too high and then
Right.
be disqualified, or I'm going to go too low and they're not going to think I'm worthy of it because it really pays this much, So let me pop in here, and this is not a knockout question. Oops, but I don't know actually this is going to edit. So if I was going to go in and edit the job, this is just the job description here, but over here in the application form is where, then I wanted to show you this anyway. So this is where, when it's really hard to apply to a job that's because of this back stuff. So I had someone just last week go, wow, that was the easiest application I've ever had. So this is what it looks like for me. If you go in to apply to this job, you put in that information, name, email, headline, if you want, phone number, put your resume in, and then you have these questions. And that's it. Submit application. So over here, though, you'll recognize, so you obviously need your name and email for purposes of reaching someone. Headline, I made that optional just because some people really like to put something about that, but I turned everything else off that I could so that they didn't feel like they had to, like if it gives you a place to put it, you feel like you have to put it in. You don't know if it says optional or not in the background, so you're going to assume it's required. So really, phone number was the only other thing. Address, no. Photo, no. We don't want to make hiring decisions based on what someone looks like or where they live. And education, like here's where it goes. No, I'm not going to make you fill that in. I have your resume. Experience, summary, and then of course you need the resume. But down here, cover letter, that's one of the ones that, if someone wants to email it to me or whatever, they can, I'll read it. But my goal is to get as many applicants as I can, not rule out as many. So I don't want someone to go, oh, I don't have a cover letter, never mind, and click back out, right? So I just turn that off. And then anything I could turn off, I did. Now I did leave the convicted of a crime as optional, and explaining it as optional. Some people don't want to share that up front. that's fine. But some people do, and just like, I need them to know now, so that I
Right.
don't
Because
too
if you
far in
get
the
hired,
process.
you're gonna go through a background check anyway.
Right,
Right.
right. And so I do put this job I did not, but most of the jobs I will put a question on here that says, you know, if hired, are you willing to undergo a background and drug screen? Because our company requires those. And that's a knockout question. So here are where this is the big mystery of where these application questions come from. You just make them up, right? So you click on it, you make it up. If I don't want to use it anymore, I just click here. I'll find, let's go to a knockout. The knockout are the ones that are bold. So you can see this one's a knockout question. And in here, this is where you put disqualified if the answer is no. So let's go back to this compensation. Now I have this as just a regular question answer, because you can choose like I'm going to act like I'm doing a new one, so you'll see. So add a question. Here is where you choose the type of answer: short answer, paragraph, yes, no, drop down, date, number. So let's put number here and ask about compensation. But, oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, now it's gone. Okay.
No worries. No worries.
Let's see. What in the world is happening? Okay. Let's just backspace here. So yes, no, see how it has disqualify if, but when I changed it to, now it's not letting me do that, but that's what I'm talking about. These systems suck. There's no way that they can rate you and do things for you. They hardly work. But so when I picked number, it doesn't allow that. So for us anyway, putting your compensation is not going to disqualify you.
Gotcha. And at the top you mentioned headline. What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's a great question. If I go back to trying to stay out of anything confidential in here. Okay, good. It puts something right here. So like if, it would just put a little, like if I wanted to say senior recruiter.
So is it similar to a headline on LinkedIn, or is it something that people can type out?
Yeah, you just type it out. It would just be like, might be a title that's most relevant, would be a good something to use. So in the interest of time, I'll show you this person applied. I looked at it and I think, great, I can't wait to talk to Lisa. So I move Lisa to phone screen. These are not in order because my the franchise does the assessments before they talk to someone, but I don't. So
gotcha.
So I'll move them to phone screen. And so now I'm in phone screen. Nothing magical happened. I had to click the button and do that. So then it just sits in here until we talk on the phone. There's a way in here to take notes under adding evaluation for the phone screen and things like that. And then after the phone screen, if I didn't like Lisa for moving forward, if I thought she's not a good fit after all, then I come in here and I choose a reason and I click disqualify. Let's answer this question. Does it automatically send an email to someone? They can do that. And so when you get an email that says we went with candidates more qualified than you, and you're thinking, please show me a resume that's more qualified than mine, there's not one. Mine is the most qualified. So if you receive that, it's probably just their standard one. I do have templates, so I might go into this email, but I don't have it automatically sent it. So I'll go in and I'll choose from my templates there, and then
got it. That's really helpful I think for people to see.
And
you know?
you can go in and individualize it here. But like, when it says their first name, and if that's the other thing, when you apply, don't use all caps or anything because it goes in forever. And don't use two names because then the system doesn't know what to do with you. But you put this on there to make it personal. I don't think that's lazy. I think it's smart and efficient. But when people get it back and their names are in all cap, they just assume no one saw anything. But this is what they're seeing.
Hmm.
And you could add in, if I didn't, I could add in like, the job name and stuff, things that other people, you might see it and think it means the whole thing was automated. So anyways, then I would go and send this email and I would disqualify Lisa. But if not, then I would go ahead and I would go back to assessments, send it out. It does automatically do this. When the assessment's finished, it moves it to review. So that's the one thing it automatically does. And then I just move them through, we don't use both of these, but we use either or. So I move it to the right place. Then there's offer, background check, hired. So, but someone
This is
physically
awesome.
moves it.
Yeah, this has been a great overview, Lisa. Thank you.
Good. And when you're in here, this is where you can text and make notes and all that stuff, but nothing's done for you automatically.
So one thing that I get a lot of questions about, which I'll go ahead and bring up now, is feedback. It seems to be pretty inconsistent across the board. Like if you interview for big tech like Amazon, Facebook, Google, you don't get any feedback whatsoever unless you know someone internally who gets it for you. If you interview for smaller companies or recruiters that aren't handling 150 recs at the same time, then you tend to get more personalized feedback on why you weren't a good fit. What are some reasons, I guess, from your experience, that candidates don't receive individualized feedback?
I have, or if we're finished with this, you can turn off my screen if you want
okay.
I have a lot of thoughts on feedback, but yes, a lot of companies are not allowed to, for reasons of it, litigious
Discrimination,
reasons.
right?
Yeah, and people say, well, then don't discriminate, but people can sue even if it's not legitimate, and so I do like to give feedback. It's one of the things because I really was lacking that in the job search. You always want to know, what could I have done different so I can do it better the next time. But it's just not that simple. The reason you didn't get this job is not going to be the reason you don't get the next job. You could do
Right.
exactly what you did for this one, and that one might be the right fit. So it's really not as helpful as you feel like it is when you're a candidate. You feel like it's going to make or break you going forward. One time I did know the recruiter. And so I said, hey, recruiter to recruiter, what was their feedback? And she said, well, she didn't like that you corrected her on your name. She was calling me Lisa Dean, like as one word, because
Right.
it just showed up that way based on their invitation or something on the Zoom picture. And so I kind of giggled that it was calling me Lisa Dean, as one word. And I guess that really offended her because that's what she told the recruiter. So how helpful is that for me for my next job, or my next
Right.
It's not helpful.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
And
I like to say, well, the hiring manager went with someone who had specific facilities management experience or something like that, if that's the case.
yeah, that makes sense. And I think we as human beings, we crave that feedback. Especially for those of us who are constantly engaged in continuous learning. We just want to be better. But I think it's also important to recognize that the feedback that we may receive sometimes isn't helpful. And sometimes isn't something that can necessarily be used to better ourselves in the next go around.
Right. And I think that's hard to see when you're going through that struggle. because you just like, God, what did I do wrong this time? And I know people get so deflated.
Yeah.
There's just so much that just going on behind the scenes. You can never know.
Exactly. I talked to someone last night and he said, I've been in second place the past 4 times. And he's like, that's basically, I'm first loser, and I was like, dude, I get it. I've been there, and he was going through every single thing he'd been doing. And he said, what am I doing wrong? And I told him, honestly, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. It sounds like you're doing everything that I would do. I gave him like some small things to focus on, but I said, at this point, it's just small stuff that you're going to have to consistently tweak, but it sounds like you're doing everything right. And, for whatever reason, most likely unbeknownst to us, and we'll never find out, that job wasn't a good fit,
Right.
and so you
People
just got to
think,
got to keep the faith.
yeah, yeah. They think, oh, I'm too shy, or I'm too outgoing, or I talked too much. I didn't talk enough. Well, whatever you did for that interview, whether that is the case or isn't the case, the next person is going to be looking for someone that is more quiet or more talkative or more shy or more outgoing. You can't win by tailoring. That's why you can only be yourself and know that you'll find your people.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And it's easy for me to say because I'm not a job seeker right now, because as much experience as I think I have in the job market, if and when I am a job seeker again, I'm probably going to be exhibiting the same emotions that we're talking about,
Right.
just because, for better or for worse, it's a crappy place to be.
It
You
is, and then throw on top of that, you're running out of your savings, or your unemployment, which is terrible anyway, ran out, and so there's just so much going on. Then not having your income can cause a problem with the relationship. It's just a it's I think people who haven't been there in a couple of years can really forget. When I was first on LinkedIn, I would every now and then see like a recruiter rant where they would just stop sending me messages, and I can't just get you a job because, and I would be like, wow, what are these people doing? It's crazy. Like, why are they losing it? And so it's one of the things that I remember specifically going, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do that. Like, I don't care how frustrated you get, because
right,
the people who are reading that are like, please, I'll take your frustrations because you're
right,
getting paid to be frustrated.
big time, big time. And I think we were talking about Amy Miller, before the call, and Amy is someone who consistently calls out that type of behavior. And I think ultimately it comes down to perspective. And if you haven't been in that position before, and empathy is not too high on your list of skills, it can be really difficult sometimes for people to say, well, that could happen to me, or I haven't been through that before, so I don't necessarily have that empathy. And when you go through that, or you go through that on multiple occasions, it's a lot easier to say, I've been there, man. Like, how can I help? Knowing that it could just as easily be you the next day.
Right, right. And when you have your people coming to you for help, what would you say your number one piece of advice is for them to help them get through it emotionally?
Honestly, I just tell them to not be afraid to ask for help. Because and I do free 30-minute calls with anyone who wants it. And I would say probably 50% of those don't turn into a conversion, but man, like, some of those conversations have stretched into long-term relationships, and I tell them, if you need something, ask. It doesn't matter whether you're paying me to provide a service for you, or you just need something on the side. Maybe I have someone I can connect you with. Maybe there's a resource that you're not aware of that I am, but you won't know until you ask for help. And if I can't help you, then I'll find someone who can, you
Yeah.
know. But, it's really easy to just think that it's you against the world when you're struggling and you're draining your savings, like you were alluding to. And I just tell people, I'm like, look, you know I've been there, And if I haven't been there, I can at least provide an empathetic ear, and I can provide constructive feedback if you're even looking for that, you
Right.
know? And so a lot of people, they just want to, they just want someone to listen to them. They just want
True.
someone to understand, like, okay, I'm not the crazy person. This is happening to other people. My story may be unique, but it's not the only story out there, and other people are struggling with the same thing. And so, a lot of the people that I talk to, they just want to know, am I doing it correctly? Is there
Right.
something else I could be doing to increase my chances of achieving a desired result? And, like I said, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but, there's a whole lot of people on, and LinkedIn has enabled us to form this army of sorts of people who have been through all of these different situations and have these very, very diverse backgrounds, but it's enabled us all to connect together. Previously, before LinkedIn, if we didn't know someone and meet in person or have some sort of shared background, we would most likely never meet someone virtually. you know I don't know why, but I just thought about MySpace, and that took me way back. But LinkedIn really enables anyone to reach out to any person at any company globally and put a face with a name.
Yeah,
Like,
that's crazy.
it's an amazing force multiplier. And I tell people all the time, especially guys and ladies, of course, who are transitioning out of the government, like, there is someone who has a similar experience to you, and they're probably on LinkedIn, and let's get you connected to them so you can have a conversation,
And I
you
think
know?
most people don't realize that most people do want to help.
Yeah,
They're not bothered. I know I gave you the example of the ranting recruiters, but most people, not just recruiters, they're happy to give advice. They're happy to help. I mean, it is hard when you have a lot of DMs that it's very time consuming,
right,
and it's not part of a recruiter's job. If a recruiter is answering you, they're doing it, they're being nice. It's just in their own free time. They're not getting anything out of it. And I feel like that's part of my purpose as a recruiter is to help people. So I do answer all of my DMs, but I have 22,000 followers. You take someone like Amy who has 100,000. So whatever I'm getting, I already spend, I feel like, all my free time, which is why I told you I never do like calls. I don't do coffee chats. I don't do interviews and things like that usually, because it would just take up all my time. And
right.
I already feel like if I'm watching TV or something, I'm also responding to people and trying to help on LinkedIn, because I just feel like, if I can, why wouldn't I? So
Yeah,
I think it's good for
absolutely.
people to know people want to help.
Yeah, and I've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people throughout the years, both formally and informally, and I don't think I've had a single one of them ever refuse to hop on a phone call with someone.
I
you
bet.
know
Yeah.
and so, like I said, for every one person that doesn't respond on LinkedIn for whatever reason, there's a whole lot of other people who, if you just ask them and you explain why you want to have a conversation with them, and
Yeah.
you know that you're also trying to be respectful of their time and their resources, a lot of people are just waiting to be asked,
Yeah. Whereas
because
I won't take a coffee chat, but I'll answer
right,
your DMs. But I think too, if you've got someone like you said who's introducing you, hey, this is someone I know. Could you have a conversation with them? Because I know you'd be able to help in X. I can't see anyone really saying no to that.
yeah. And I tell people all the time, and I think I've said I tell people all the time like 6 times already, but um,
But hey,
you
you
know,
do. You tell them
yeah,
all the time.
I tell them all the time, the worst thing that can happen is that they say no,
Right.
and you haven't lost anything, but if they say yes, and you're able to spend 15-30 minutes on the phone with someone and get a little bit more information than you have before, you never know where that might go.
And you're not
And
going to get a yes if you don't ask.
exactly, exactly. And
It's already a no.
Exactly. It's already a no. That's that's exactly it. And I've made so many great relationships with people I've never met in person.
Yeah.
And it's all been facilitated through LinkedIn and virtual chats and
Yeah.
just a genuine desire to know people and care about them. And so much value has come to my life just from that intentionality. And LinkedIn has been a big part of how we've been able to facilitate that type of intentionality. So,
Yeah.
um, Lisa, I know that we're about an hour and 20 minutes over from when we started, and I definitely want to be respectful of your time. So, is there any advice that you would give people who are, a job seeker right now and who are perhaps discouraged in the process?
You know, I don't feel like there's any advice for someone that's discouraged that can really make them feel better. To say, hang in there, just keep doing what you're doing, all of those things. People have heard it. I don't think it's helpful. I like what you said about, ask people for help. Feel free to do that. My biggest advice is to always, tailor your resume and try to reach out to a connection. Use different resources. LinkedIn's not the only place to apply. So, get
Yeah,
on Indeed and ZipRecruiter and all of those other ones too. Really just use your resources, all of
yeah,
them, human and, programs.
absolutely. I think it's very easy to get tunnel vision with LinkedIn and think it's the only job platform out there, when in reality, there's thousands.
Yeah.
And some of them are very, very specific and they only tailor to a small subset of the population. Maybe it's remote only, maybe it's sales only. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
out there. And, Google is your friend. Don't just rely upon LinkedIn. That's a fantastic piece of advice. Anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. We covered a
Awesome.
lot.
We
So,
did. Thank
yeah,
you so much for your generosity and your willingness to spend an hour and a half with us. It's something I deeply appreciate. And I know it's something that others will deeply appreciate as well.
you're so welcome. And thanks for having me. Thanks for trying to spread the word and all that you're doing to help everyone that's transitioning.
Absolutely. Well, Lisa, thank you again, and I hope you have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.